Good morning from Panhandle Outdoors with Winston Chester. Panhandle Outdoors, your source for fishing, hunting, and information for folks who enjoy the great outdoors. Now sit back, relax. It's Panhandle Outdoors.
Good morning. Welcome to Panhandle Outdoors. I am Bill Allen, sitting in for Winston Chester this morning, who I believe is fishing down at the Cape, taking advantage of his retirement. Today is Wednesday, July the 6th. We got a special guest on, a very informative show set up for you. But let's go into the weather for today. Shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. It's hot. The high today is supposed to be 91 with the low, not much of a break, of 79. Only got a 10% chance of rain, and wind forecasted southwest at 10 to 15. And of course, I always say you could add 10 miles an hour to that at some point. But in watching the Weather Channel early this morning, this whole area is under a heat advisory. And so, you know, and for those of you who've been out there fishing or mowing the lawn or just walking outside, you know how hot it is, how dangerous things can be. We're going to talk about a little bit of that shortly. High tide today is at 11:20 a.m. with the low at 9:50. The peak fishing times today, I think we just missed the first one, 2:19 a.m. to 5:19 a.m. But then this afternoon from 1:53 to 4:53. Apalachicola River reading, 2.4 feet. And it's going to stay level pretty much through Sunday. As always, when it's that low, I mean, it's great. The reports of the fish down there are fantastic. I mean, a big brim, and a lot of people catching bass, but there's a lot of stuff sticking up, and there's a lot of stuff just under the water out there, and you need to be really careful running around that river. There's some things that will ruin your day. Choctawhatchee at Caryville, it's at 3.5, and it's pretty much hanging steady. The same thing there. It's great fishing, a lot of good reports. Just, you know, be careful running around. There's not a lot of water, and there's a whole lot of stumps and stick-ups down there. So we're going to take this quick break and be right back with our special guest. Welcome back. You recognize a familiar face, Captain Matt Smith.
Good morning, Bill.
How you doing, man?
Doing well. Glad to be here.
Always a pleasure to have Matt here and their group from Panama City Inshore, because they're on the water all the time, and great guides. Matt, let's just, you know, I mentioned the heat. You and I were talking about this a little bit earlier. You know, you've got your clients coming out, and you have to, you know, prepare them and warn them. What are some of the things that you do?
First thing is early. You can't emphasize that enough. And we deal with this on a daily basis, because we'll book a trip, and then we usually touch base the day before. And when I touch base with them and request 5:30, us meeting and leaving out at 5:30, it's a little bit of a shock.
Yeah,
they're on vacation. It's supposed to be kind of you know, leisurely, and we go back and forth with that with certain folks. If you got young kids, I understand we might push it a little later, but you can't emphasize getting out on the water early and just getting the best part of the day. You can up your odds for success and enjoyment tremendously by getting on the water out and early. And one of the things, you know, just to touch on that, is with kids.
Yeah.
Take kids a lot. And you know, if you're out there and you're wanting to take a young person and introduce them, or just get into the fishing more this time of year, you really got to think. You really got to plan and be mindful of the heat. So that's first and foremost. The second thing is we focus on live bait this time of year. Right. I know that in the fall and the winter, we talk a lot about fishing with artificials and fly fishing. There are a few fly fishing opportunities this time of year, but consistently go out and catch fish, especially during a short period of time.
Right.
Really focus on live bait. We're going to talk about some specifics. I know we touch on that briefly when we talk, but sometimes it's nice to get a little more into detail. Got a few specifics. I actually had a hook left over. I found in my pocket.
That's what you said.
That's
where I find most of mine at the end of the day.
So we've got a little visual aid there, and I think that'll help folks. And you know, Several other key things. The tide. We talk about the tide all the time. You don't have to fully understand them, but the main thing, and I always talk about this, moving water.
Yeah.
You got to have moving water, and generally that coincides with the early morning hours of the day. Generally, this time of year we have a high tide somewhere in the morning. It's usually moving, topping out somewhere, early to mid morning, and then it's going to peak out. A lot of times 9, 10 o'clock. That's a great time to be finishing up.
Yeah, no kidding, because by 9 or 10 o'clock
that's it.
It's getting
That's
pretty
it.
nasty out there at that point.
That's it. So if you want to fish, if you want to go and throw artificials, throw topwaters, be there first thing in the morning. Get up shallow. The fish are going to move in with as far as trout and redfish, your fish are going to move with the tide. You're going to get up around the grass, feed on bait fish, work a shoreline, work a flat, throw that topwater. Once the sun gets up, you get into that 7 o'clock range, you're pretty much have had the best of the morning with that. Then if you're going to throw artificials, you want to move a little deeper, fish on the edge of flats, maybe fish a couple potholes, stuff like that for a trout or a flounder.
Yeah, we've basically been doing that, and to do, we don't fish a lot of, like Greg and I, or Jim and I don't fish a lot of live bait.
Right.
It's a fantastic way to fish.
Right.
I mean, no question. And I've still got a really nice bait net in there that I keep all the time. But we just we don't, and so we don't focus on it a lot here. But it's something that we really need to talk about, like you said, with kids. It's just a great way to fish. But we've been using these suspending baits, these Miradines, and others. Greg's got one he calls a brown bomber. I have no idea what that is. But a big-eyed suspended bait that, when the top water's over, which is always my preference.
Sure.
We've been going to that kind of thing and been producing just tremendously.
Sure.
Tremendously.
Absolutely. And we get into some tides during the month that you're going to have moving water late into the morning, even midday. I know it's pretty interesting. I caught the tail end of the weigh-in down at St. Andrews.
Right.
And talking with several of the fishermen, and they all reported their best window on that day was about 1 o'clock. And so that there again, all these rules aren't set in stone, and what that was the tide finally moved, finally pushed in enough, and they had been in areas all morning waiting and fishing and looking for these fish, and they didn't show up till after lunch. I mean, hottest part of the day.
I was in it. Greg and I fished that tournament, and that's absolutely true. It didn't move. It was a lot later. So let's take our first break, and then we'll be right back. Hey, welcome back. I wanted to go back just a minute and touch on something, too, about how important it is when we're all out there on that water is to have a lot of water in the boat. Sports drinks, water. Some of the sports drinks have a lot of sugar in them. You have to kind of know what fits with you. But alcohol and caffeine will cause you to dehydrate.
Sure, combination of that and heat
is a very bad thing. And of course, alcohol and boats in the first place really don't have any business going together.
Absolutely.
But we take just tons of water and stuff like that. You just have to continue to hydrate all day long. You see all these guys who are out there with the buffs on, and that's not just for looks.
No.
For years now, I've had one every time I've gone into the water. It helps protect the sun off your nose. But when you're running and being able to pull that stuff off, the wind factor that comes into place, especially with boats nowadays.
Absolutely.
So there's just a sunscreen. There's just a lot of things you need to do, but you need to keep a lot of water on that boat, keep it cold, and hydrate really often out there.
Goes back to preparation, and when you have extreme conditions, that's when you don't really just need to kind of go on a whim. You do need to plan.
You do need to plan.
Got a tip of the day, something we'll talk about with that.
Yeah.
And one thing I do a lot of times is I remind people on the boat. I say, look, drink. Let me see you drink a bottle of water, because we've all been there. By the time you get the headache and you realize you're starting the early stages of dehydration, you can't hydrate out in that heat. You cannot cool your body down or quench your thirst, and then it's too late. And occasionally we see that happen where we've got to maybe cut a trip short, or we can't necessarily stay and fish this area because we've got to get that boat moving, get some air moving.
It gets dangerous.
It gets dangerous.
It gets dangerous, and you have the opportunity to plan your trip, and you know you're going with Matt, or you know you're going on your own or whatever. They always tell you, the day before, the night before, you can start hydrating then.
Sure you can.
To start building that tolerance up, if you will.
And I'm a big coffee drinker, and I've somehow built a tolerance up to be able to drink that big Yeti every morning. But as a standard rule, lower your coffee intake, maybe half and half. What you normally do, drink the rest water, like you say, to pre-hydrate. Yeah. And you will be glad you did.
Yeah, it's not a joke. It gets serious out there, and it can get serious in a heartbeat. So, you really, really need to stay hydrated and really plan your trips and make sure you got the right kind of clothing even helps. And nowadays you have so many options, things that, I don't really know anybody that fishes in cotton anymore. You get wet and you stay wet, but these new fabrics that help you, cool down, and they draw the moisture out and they cool is really, really
money well spent.
Money well spent. That's very true. Yeah. And bug spray.
Always bring bug spray. Bug spray.
The sand gnats are ravenous.
Yes, they are.
And there's a bumper crop.
Yes, there are.
There's a bumper crop. And I had a call the other day. Winston did the remote show, if you will, up in Defuniak with a bunch of viewers. And I've had several calls, and several people asked me about that little mixture that Bill and I used down at the river for the flies, the biting flies and the yellow flies and all that stuff, and it works fantastic on them.
I've heard good things.
Fantastic. And so Winston called me, and one of the people who had seen it wanted the recipe again, which is pretty simple. But and I said on the show, that's the first time we used it. We used it down the river, and it was fantastic. Not a single yellow fly, anything.
Impressive.
Yeah, and they hunt me down from miles away. That is, in my experience, in that tournament you're talking about, it does not work on sand gnats.
Sand gnats.
Yeah. So I had to pull out the off with the DEET in it, to do that. So, and I had said I wasn't sure. I heard it did, and I'm sure it's maybe from person to person, but it did not do it for me.
Not for you.
Did not do it for me. So fair warning. If you take that out to the bay, you won't have any problem with flies, but you better have a little DEET handy somewhere.
Well, speaking of that, some of the toughest conditions, and when you factor in the heat, is on these days where we don't have any wind. So not only can that create issues with the sand gnats, wind can be your best friend for more than one reason. The other is you break up that surface a little bit.
Absolutely.
A wind ripple. That can actually get behind. A lot of times you've got to adjust the tide. What we plan on the tide doing simply based on the wind. And we get these real hard south winds this time of year. They'll get behind that tide in the morning and push it in, and it'll top out early.
Exactly.
And vice versa in the winter, of course, when it can kind of blow the water out of the bay. But having that wind can absolutely be the difference between a trip being successful and enjoyable and not. And occasionally, of course, this time of year weather is always a concern, and people say, well, we've got a chance of thunderstorm, and I say, well, that's actually a good thing. Well, cloud cover and breeze, and you're actually gonna like that weather being around us. Of course, safety being first and foremost. We're not going to fish in a thunderstorm or lightning or anything like that, but you've got that weather around you constantly moving, fluctuates that barometer a little bit. Fish will become active for more than one reason.
It's kind of like moving water.
Absolutely.
When there's activity like that, anything, it gets them going, and that's the other thing that I'm glad you touched on that. But that it's our summer, right? I mean, we're going to have thunderstorms come up
every day.
Some of them be pretty bad. And it's nothing to play with.
No.
Nothing to play with. If you got the, most of us now, you have the phone where you can look and check the app and see where those things are and which way they're moving. It's on a lot of the GPSs, and there's even lightning alerts, and you can set it within X number of miles and that kind of thing. But it's just not, you know, that's staying to the last minute. You know, if you're catching fish, there's no point pushing it like that.
Take advantage of that technology, and you know, unfortunately, we occasionally get a reminder we have a fatality. Or two every year. Weather related, lightning related, and so really put that in perspective. Is catching a couple more fish, or just feeling like you're hanging out at Shell Island for an extra hour.
That's what I was about to say, where we've had a lot of,
is it really worth, you know, wrapping it up early, head in, and
yeah, I mean, probably goes without saying, but you got to respect what's going on out there.
Absolutely.
And it, you know, after all, it's just fish. You know, you could come back, but it, you know, just respect that lightning, pay attention to it, pay attention to the storms, track them, see which way they're going. You know, a lot of them don't last long.
No, they don't.
Get somewhere safe, come back and have a good time. All right, we're going to live bait talk when we come back. So let's take this break. We'll be right back. Hey, and welcome back again with Captain Matt Smith. And as promised, this time we're actually going to talk about live bait fishing. And you have a little bit of a unique way of doing it. Not a lot of people fish this way, but it's a very successful way to fish.
That's right. That's right. You know, I get a lot of questions about live bait and specifics, and the best kind of live bait is the kind that you can catch quickly. Because we're going back to fishing early. You don't want to necessarily spend 2 hours catching a specific type of bait if that's going to put you starting at 8 o'clock in the morning. You've somewhat defeated the purpose. So wherever you're at, that's part of time on the water and being aware of your surroundings and understanding what's available. And it doesn't matter if it's bull minnows, finger mullet, good, you know, a good tiger minnow, pinfish, small, medium pinfish, menhaden, or what we call pogies. Occasionally we get some pilchards in the bay. Those are my favorite, but unfortunately they're also some of the most unpredictable, and we really don't have any in our bay system right now. So those aren't on the list. Never a bad idea to look for birds. See anywhere on the shoreline you see bird activity, he's there, and that's what he's feeding on, whatever was available. So with that being said,
and with a decent net, right?
With a decent net, you need a decent net.
These little 4 and 5 foot nets in a bag thing.
No, invest in a minimum of 6 foot. Recommend 8 foot is a better all around. We throw 10 to 12, and that's a little overkill for most folks. But we're trying to catch a nice amount of bait for a trip and do it in a hurry. So, with that being said, the next real important thing is you work hard to locate and catch this live bait is to be able to keep it lively, keep it looking natural. You need a good live well, not a bubbler, not something that you keep shrimp in during the wintertime. You need to move some water.
Right.
This time of year, minimum of 800 gallons an hour. Most of your pumps. You could probably get by with 500, but 500 really being a minimum. I prefer 800, and then of course you can go all the way up to 1,200 gallons an hour, and that's a lot of water. But that water needs to circulate, constantly be moving new water through.
Those bulls won't last
and
long.
Overflow. No, and a bull minnow's tough. That's one good thing about bull minnow. Pinfish, he's pretty tough. Mullet, fairly hardy. So once you've caught the bait, you've got to have a good place to keep it alive, and then from there, as far as getting into some specifics, you want to use the lightest tackle that you can get away with. We're fortunate here. One of the things I'm reminded of on a daily basis, take folks from all over the country, how beautiful our water is, how clear it is. And that clarity is what creates some of the challenges we have. You're not going to get away with fishing 50-pound braided line straight to a hook.
Right.
You know, catfish might fall for that, but I'm not fishing for catfish.
Nobody.
So I scale it down. I actually use 10-pound Power Pro braid, and I keep 3 for my inshore bay fishing. I keep 3 sizes of fluorocarbon leader. You can use monofilament too. 15, 20, and 25.
Yeah.
That's what I use. And with that, I also use the smallest hook that I can get away with. And a lot of people are surprised, which is a number 2. You see that pack there, and maybe see the hook in relation to the tip of my finger. It's not much of a hook.
No.
And people say, well, I thought we were going to catch big redfish. And I say, well, we plan to, we are, or catch a nice trout or a big mackerel. And the reason for such a small hook is to make that bait look as natural and as lively as possible.
Right.
The bigger the hook,
Natural movement.
Doesn't matter if it's a shrimp, a finger mullet, a menhaden, a bull minnow. The bigger the hook you put in the nose of that bait, the less natural it's going to look.
Well, it's invasive, it's heavier.
Weighs them down, not to mention the visibility.
You get a lot more strikes, a lot more hookups that way.
Sure. Might lose a fish occasionally.
You have to do some things to catch that fish,
That's right, that's right. So we've talked about the line. Now let's talk about the tackle itself. A 7 to 7.5 foot. Some people prefer 8-foot rod is too long for me with multiple people on the boat, but an 8-foot rod is an excellent option. But let's say 7.5 foot, medium to medium light, so much softer tip than a lot of rods you'll see.
Fast tip.
Fairly fast tip.
Yeah.
But you want a little bit of a parabolic action that comes through the blank, not all in the top quarter, say, of the rod from the tip back. And then the other most important thing is your drag. Back the drag off. Yeah. So with this light tackle, light wire hooks, not only is that going to cast much better for you, but when you do get a bigger than average fish, you got enough drag. All of this light tackle, these small hooks, small leader, it's all going to hold up because you're giving that fish enough leeway, and that takes a little bit of experimenting. I'm not one of these guys. I cannot tell you how many pounds of drag I fish.
No,
I don't do that. It's just by feel. And I will occasionally, so we'll hook a big redfish or a big Spanish mackerel. I will actually go up while a client's fighting that fish and back the drag off while they're fighting it, because I know that fish is going to require a little more leeway, so to speak.
Well, Matt, I appreciate you coming in this morning. These are great tips. It's a great way to fish live bait. It takes a little of experience. You gotta work it a little bit, but you get a lot of hookups and a lot of fun. So we're out of here. I appreciate you watching. Do something good for somebody, and we'll see you tomorrow.
God bless you.
Thanks for joining us for Panhandle Outdoors with Winston Chester. Panhandle Outdoors features hunting, fishing, and other activities and information to help you enjoy the great outdoors. Join us next time for Panhandle Outdoors.